Well, like we're discussing, the industry is ever expanding. So initially we just had sports, right? There were physical players playing the game and there was a referee, which we still have. Then we came up to esports,
Yes.
which is online sports, right? So that was the industry booming further. Now we have fantasy sports. That's another dimension to sports itself. So when we talk about an interesting case, there are several cases wherein the high courts have simultaneously said that fantasy sports is not illegal, it is not betting, and it is different to betting.
Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of LegalWiki, your go-to source for legal education and inspiration, where we interact with the best legal professionals from the various legal industry. And in today's episode, I'm delighted and thrilled to have Ms. Saman Naseem ma'am on my channel. She's currently working as a lead research for Sports Authority of India, and she has more than 8 years of experience in the legal field. Moreover, she is also a co-author of a monograph on sports law in India, published by Wolters Kluwer International, Netherlands, and also co-authored monographs on environmental law, medical law, and regional law of India, and also on international environmental law, international energy law. These monographs are also part of the International Encyclopedia of Laws. Furthermore, ma'am has also been connected with an NGO, namely the Madad Foundation Trust, which focuses primarily on supporting meritorious students in their educational endeavor and in other similar charitable activities. And today, ma'am has joined us to share her invaluable experience and insights into the legal aspects of sports law, an emerging field of law which is unique and remains a relatively unexplored sector. So, a very warm welcome to you, ma'am. I'm thrilled to have this conversation with you today.
Thank you so much, Surbi. Thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure to talk about sports law.
My pleasure, ma'am. So before we delve into this discussion, I would like to thank you for accepting my invitation and giving your valuable time. I hope our conversation will be beneficial for those aspiring to enter into this particular field.
I certainly hope so too.
Yes. So with this, let's begin. So starting with, what is a sports law and what are the areas of laws and regulations covered under this sector and their drawbacks? And also adding to this, how did you end up choosing this sports law as your career option?
Well, Surbi, sports law is a very broad term. So when we speak about sports law, any legal issue within the sports arena will be referred to within the sports law sector as well. But to understand and to connect dots from where these laws and regulations come and how sports law has developed through these years, we need to understand and go back to the base, the first dot that every law starts with, which is the Constitution of India. So when we talk about the Constitution of India, in entry 33 of the Schedule 7th, it puts sports in the states category. Now, that means that only the states can legislate on sports. That is a good thing and that is a bad thing as well. There are drawbacks to it. We'll discuss them further. The first drawback would, of course, be that states, whatever they legislate, will only be within their state. The jurisdiction will be limited. So we don't have any central laws regarding sports. That is the first problem. Then that is the first dot. 2, the Constitution of India, where the law starts from. The next dot would be the state legislatures, of course. Every state, most of the states have their own legislations in respect to sports. And we go through them and understand how exactly they are regulating sports. The third dot would be national sports federations. Now, every sport in India has a national sports federation. And similarly, every national sports federation of every sport has an international sports federation. So they all have laws and regulations. Yeah. These laws and regulations also help in regulating sports law in India. The fourth dot would be something that came out from the joint efforts of the state, the center, the Olympic Association, and the National Sports Federation way back in 2001. So we're talking about the National Sports Policy. We did have that in 1984 as well, but the first joint effort of all these people coming together, of all these authorities coming together, was in 2001, which we still have, the National Sports Policy. That is a very amazing joint effort by all of these parties, and that is still being followed to this day. The fifth dot would be the National Sports Development Bill. Now, when I talk about these 5 dots, I'm not just talking about that all the laws for all sports and for all kind of youths or everything are within these 5. That is not the case. Sports law has a lot of other laws touching it as well. For example, you can talk about contract law, employment law, IPR laws, competition laws. All of these come within sports law to help resolve its issues and resolve its disputes. Of course, there are broadcasting laws. Then drafting and negotiation enters, arbitration, conciliation. These are all general laws that are there, but then they help sports law as a whole as well. So my base started possibly way back in 2006 when my father, Mr. Naseem, landed an opportunity to write a book on sports law in India with Wolters Kluwer. That was the first time that he got that opportunity, and that was to be a part of the Encyclopedia of Laws. So basically what Wolters Kluwer did was they took up all the sports law of all the countries and they put it in one book, like an encyclopedia. And they used to have that. In 2012, he had his first book come out individually for India, and what he would keep doing, possibly because I was also doing my projects in law school by then, and I was trying to, research on several aspects of general constitutional law or some project that I was being given by my teachers. He would ask me to research on something that was related to any of the books that he was going through at that point of time. That is my first connection with sports law. So he would ask me to research on something that he could not find material on. Then we would both sit down together, do our own research, sit back down, discuss it, understand what exactly did I find, what can be the next step. And that kind of grew as the years went by. So by the time that I graduated in 2015, I completely started doing the books with him. So every year the books were updated, my knowledge was updated. Anything that came up new, it clicked. Thereafter, through several years of freelancing and book updations, I landed this opportunity in Sports Authority of India. And as a lead researcher, it's been 1.5 years now almost, and it's been a wonderful journey.
Amazing. So apart from the laws you have mentioned, so are all these laws in a proper order, or it's a transparent so that it's addressing all the issues which athletes and the other people are facing related to sports?
Not really, Siddhi. We have to understand that sports has literally developed as and when its issues arose. So, for example, when there were broadcasting issues that arose in respect of a particular sport, the courts applied broadcasting laws, and they kind of settled the law in that particular regard. So there are still a lot of areas where there are no laws, or there's a dearth of laws, or there are laws which were drafted but they never saw the light of the day. So technically they are not legislations yet, they are just bills or they've lapsed. Right. So we are still trying to keep a balance between the laws that we have, which are very sport specific, and the laws that are very general and are just applied to situations of sports law. So we're still trying to balance that out, but of course there are a lot of places where we don't have a law, and general law is applied then.
Yeah. So thank you for explaining this wonderfully. So moving on to our next question, sir, can you provide an overview of your role and responsibilities as a lead research with the Sports Authority of India?
So basically, I'm involved in the research of two schemes. One is the National Center of Excellence scheme, which we call in short as the NCOA scheme. Now, these are training centers for budding athletes, and they are given all kinds of support there. It's like a hostel plus a training facility for them. Physios are given to them, coaches, and their studies are taken into account. And they are given a chance to develop their skill further. Now, these are very nascent, new athletes who are there in the NCOA. The other scheme is the Khelo India scheme. Now, the Khelo India scheme, what it does is, all the athletes in India who have a proven talent, they give them monetary support. So now, when an athlete has proven his talent and he wants to develop further, they need a lot of monetary support in the terms of diets, in the terms of good coaches, exposure, uh, training facilities, equipment, etc., sports science facilities. So Khelo India Athlete Scheme kind of gives them that support, and it's like you just focus on your work and we'll do the rest. It's something like that. So I basically do research on both these schemes and the athletes of both these schemes.
Oh, this is so nice. So basically, Sports Authority of India takes care of everything.
Yes. If you're a Khelo India athlete, or if you're in the NCOE, depending on which athlete you are, Sports Authority of India extends support in terms of anything that you might be feeling that is low. For example, diet. Diet is a very problematic concept in India because, of course, athletes are not very well equipped with the information. So they will have coaches, they will have nutritionists, they will have physios to make them understand how their body can, kind of develop even further to give them some advantage in that particular game, and to understand that there is a break-off period as well, so that the athlete does not, extend themselves over a long period of time and just kind of crumbles down. So all of these are taken care of by that particular society that is created then.
And this is for all the players of Khelo India, right?
All the athletes who are in Khelo India scheme, it is for all of them. And I'm talking about 20 sports. So I'm in the Khelo India division. Of course, there are other divisions. So, for example, there is the TOPS division, which works with the elite athletes and gives them the same kind of support. So there are different departments which work, and in total, they look after, different sections of the athletes. So there's youth, junior, looked after by Khelo India, and then there's elite athletes who are looked after by the top scheme. So that is how the whole thing comes up.
So apart from this, is there any other legal teams also who takes care of, like, contract drafting would have been there, or other things, or any issues which comes up with organizations?
Of course. So basically, there is a whole legal team in Sports Authority of India, and their main work is, of course, as you said, contract drafting or comments on contracts, MOUs. We are talking about disciplinary issues here. Any kind of comment on the legal aspect of SAI is provided by them. So there is a whole department for that.
Wonderful. So what are some key legal developments in sports that will particularly shape the sports field?
If I have to pinpoint a few, the first would certainly be the emergence of arbitration and conciliation.
Correct.
Now, what one has to understand is sports is a very dynamic field. Time is of the essence. So if you're talking about something very basic, like a selection of an athlete, if there is a dispute regarding that, one cannot keep waiting till the competition is over. The selection criteria, if there are disputes regarding it, it has to be cleared, the dispute has to be resolved, and the selection is to be confirmed, and thereafter the training has to begin and the competition has to be done. So we're talking about things that have to be done very quickly, which is not the case when we go to court.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, in India, even now, most athletes have to go through the court process. When we talk about it internationally, the athlete's first thing is to go to arbitration, but not so in India. So the emergence of arbitration and mediation slowly and steadily in sports arena will be a very good change for the sector, not just for selection issues, for doping issues. Athletes are banned from a range of 1 year to 4 years. An athlete's whole career can go off in those 4 years. So if there is a proper procedure of appeal and, arbitration and mediation can come into view, and regarding age fraud as well, then this will ensure that there's very quick resolution of issues, and the athlete does not waste a lot of time off the field, so that their performance is also not affected. So that is one key development that I can think of. The other would be the guidelines that came up regarding safeguarding the interest of athletes, because that also included that all the national sports federations are to have a grievance redressal system. Now, when we are talking about the athlete, the first point of contact for every athlete is its own national sports federation. So, as every sport has it, there are experts in that. So, if you are going through that channel regarding your dispute, possibly your dispute will be resolved very quickly, very efficiently, and that is the first level. So the dispute comes and then it goes. It's resolved. Now the problem is that the guidelines does not give out a timeline for making these grievance redressal systems in NSF. There's no time period that you have to get it done by then. It is mandatory, but without a time period. So what recent research showed us was that a lot of NSFs did not have an internal grievance redressal system. And athletes hence were forced to go into courts, which took a lot of time out of their schedule. So that is one thing possibly we can work towards, even though it's a very big key development that such a mandatory guideline has come. But of course, there can be some improvements done in it, and that can help athletes in the long run.
So there's still a lot of loopholes which needs to be taken care of.
Of course, every law has a drawback. Every law can have that. And the best part about law is its dynamic culture.
Correct.
It keeps changing. It keeps pushing its boundaries. It keeps covering those loopholes, and it keeps coming up. So that is one thing that we always will have to do. Yes, completely new issues will come up. Once you get rid of these loopholes completely, because sports law in itself is, actually you have to understand what the problem, not just the problem, I'll say, the difference between sports law and any other law is sports is different in the law applied on sport would be different in every sport. We're talking about team sports like hockey. They're completely different. We're talking about contact sports like boxing. We're talking about individual sports like weightlifting.
Yeah.
So you're talking about very different sports within the sport. Sports is a generic term. You give it to all of these, but then these are very different to each other. Contact sport will be very different to an individual sport. It will be very different to a team sport. So you have to keep revolutionizing the law in relation to that.
As per all the issues coming up. So would you like to discuss any famous or interesting sports law case?
Well, like we're discussing, the industry is ever expanding. So initially we just had sports, right? There were physical players playing the game and there was a referee, which we still have. Then we came up to esports,
yes,
which is online sports, right? So that was the industry booming further. Now we have fantasy sports. That's another dimension to sports itself. So when we talk about an interesting case, there are several cases wherein the high courts have simultaneously said that fantasy sports is not illegal, it is not betting, and it is different to betting. Recently, in 2022, the Supreme Court also reiterated the same thing in a special petition, and it said that fantasy sports is a game of skill.
Correct.
And it is given protection under Article 19(1)(g). So you understand how the sector has grown to something so different to physical sports that even though it's based on physical sports possibly, but it's not played physically. Nobody's playing it. Fantasy sports, completely new dimension. So that is how possibly the courts are also supporting the development of law and the development of the industry. So that is one thing that possibly will be very interesting to see also, because the same case which said that this fantasy sports is a game of skill, it also talked about the GST that can be levied on these particular games. Exactly. So now the thing is that they've laid down that fantasy sports is protected. It's a game of skill, done, good. But the GST thing is still open for debate. It's still open for the courts to decide.
Yes.
So we'll still be seeing this case develop further as and when this starts and goes. So this will be a very interesting case to follow.
Correct. So as you're right now mentioning about esports, fantasy sports, then there is a match fixing, illegal betting, then sexual harassment cases also, and then anti-doping. So how this is being handled by the authorities, and do we have law which actually addresses all these issues?
Of course, if we go one by one, for example, if we talk about, let's say, esports. Okay, so esports, recently in April 2023, the Ministry of Electronics and IT gave out the regulations for online real money games. So they came up with these guidelines, even though this is not very new. They've been given out recently, but these were also done previously in support of, there was a legislation called Sports Online Gaming and Prevention of Fraud Bill, which was, I think, in 2018. So that was, even though that lapsed, but we had been working on this. And recently, the Ministry of Electronics and IT came up with this particular regulation. So that is one step in the good direction, that there are laws and regulations being made for esports. Of course, there are the problems of the GST issue, which the center is planning to levy on since October, I think. Now, that will kind of pave the way further, possibly for this particular section. In regards to match fixing, of course, it's haunted the sports industry for I don't know how many years now. And unfortunately, it is not an independent offense. So there's nothing called like match fixing being defined somewhere and it's being given in the offensive list. It's just being dealt by the IPC, general law dealing with something like that. So it's, I think, dealt under cheating and provisions like that, mistrust, etc. So we don't have any specific law for match fixing for now. Even though we've tried, in 2013, India tried to give out the Prevention of Sporting Fraud Bill, which was also, of course, a revamped version of Prevention of Dishonesty in Sports Bill 2001. But neither of them saw the light of the day. So we still are working with general laws being applied on match fixing. If we continue to betting, now the most regulated way of betting, of course, is fantasy sports, because it was called out as a game of skill, not a game of chance. Now, game of chances are, of course, illegal. So betting is illegal. But being in the concurrent list, mostly states have enacted laws on that. So you will have to go to different states' laws, and one will have to understand how they have been punished or whatever sentencing is there. Of course, in 2019, I think, Sri Lanka was the first South Asian country which gave out a proper legislation criminalizing match fixing. That was the first time that any country in the South Asian part of the world did it, and Sri Lanka was that one. So we are still in a void in relation to match fixing, but we're still trying to develop the law from what we have in the general laws, IPC, etc. Regarding sexual harassment, of course, that is the one point. Sexual harassment actually is usually dealt with the POSH Act till now. So that is, of course, General Act applied to sports issues. And therein the NSF have been made as a NSF, sports institutes, stadiums, all have been talked about as workplaces. So that is how inculcation of all these places have been taken care of by the POSH Act. So it's become a little more specified to sports, but still, it's of course, it's there in the general laws as well. That is how authorities basically work in these sections. Of course, there is the internal dispute redressal system in NSFs and in SAI, wherein these complaints are taken seriously and disputes are resolved and punishments are given out, and etc. So that is also there, of course. Right. But of course, we can do about with a few other laws in these sections, which are very sport specific.
And apart from that, we are having several precedents case laws like related to match fixing.
Of course.
So apart
litigation is one thing that has developed a lot of laws.
Correct.
Not just sports law. Litigation has done its due for a lot of laws.
Correct. So apart from that, like nowadays, women are also entering into this particular field. So is there any specific law or anything which is exactly targeting or helping out women in sports law?
In sports law?
Yeah. Any provision, special provision for women?
Okay. Let me try to understand this. So you're talking about athletes getting into sports, or you're talking about women, girls in general, or lawyers,
girls in
female
general.
lawyers getting
No, not lawyers, athletes, basically. Yeah.
Okay.
Athletes, so.
You're talking about athletes.
Yes.
Of course, gender bias cannot happen in sports, and there are laws, general laws applied to that. And I think, of course, there's no particular law regarding that, but there are a lot of policies. So, for example, there are specific leagues that happen for women, only women sports, and a lot of other things that are there, scholarships, etc., which kind of help women athletes to come up into the sporting sector. So there are policies and there are safeguards, of course, along with scholarships and all these motivational factors. So that is there for women athletes.
Amazing. So moving on to our few last questions. So what components of law are essential to know if one wishes to pursue a career in sports law?
As would be very evident with our discussion, one thing that is very much needed for any person to enter sports law is a robust understanding of the framework of basic laws in India. Now, the plus point towards this is that every law school teaches this.
Right.
Every law school has Constitution of India, contract law, IPR, competition laws being taught. So if you are focused enough, you can understand these basic laws. Thereafter, you can develop your knowledge on these basic laws by doing internships. So when we were in law school, we were mandated for 10 internships in 5 years.
Right.
I don't know if they still have this rule or not,
Yeah,
but
BCI
it used to be a very good rule.
Yeah.
They still have this rule. Oh, perfect rule. Beautiful. Because that is how you understand not just what you want to do, but then you can also develop your profile while being in law school. So if you've, let's say, done your 10 internships in very sports-specific organizations, you have enough experience to go and work in any organizations for their own employment as well. That is something that can pave a pathway for a person. So doing internships in organizations which are sports specific can help build your CV while being in law school as well, if you're very clear in pursuing this particular section. Other than that, of course, hard work, dedication, connections. 3 things to it all.
Sports Authority of India accepts an internship application?
Internships, possibly no. I'm not very clear on the internships part. But of course, if you're talking about internships, I would rather say lawyers should start, or law students should start with internships in NGOs, because you have to understand NGOs get a lot of variety of tasks.
Yes. And
especially sports-specific NGOs get a variety of tasks and variety of issues in front of them. So then you can have a touch of all these, issues, and you can broad base your understanding. So once you start from NGOs, then you can work towards organizations, private organizations or government organizations which give out. I think Ministry of Youth Affairs does offer internships. So one can try that for developing their sports knowledge further. So that is possibly a pathway that sports people can use.
Yeah. And what is the hiring procedure in the Sports Authority of India?
Okay, so usually the vacancies come out in their website, and of course, Loctopus is a great platform to try all the jobs, etc.
Yes.
They shortlist the CVs. For example, in lead research, if you're applying for lead research or senior lead research, you need to have some kind of a publication background. So possibly a few papers during law school, if you've tried in sports, that would help build your CV. And regarding legal YPs that they have, young professionals in legal, the usual requirement is some kind of exposure in the legal side of things. So even if you've gone for an NGO or you've had a few years of litigation practice under you, that could help. And other than that, of course, they have the usual shortlisting of CV. There's an interview, and thereafter, if you're lucky enough, then you get selected. That's the usual
There's no
process.
examination as of, right?
No, there's no written examination. No, not even in Ministry of Youth Affairs. Mostly they come out as young professionals, the vacancies, young professionals legal. So people can apply in that. And if you have a few publications under your hand, a few internships, and you've worked in the law section, good enough. That should help.
So how would you suggest one should go about their career in sports law, and what avenues are open to sports law aspirants in India?
Well, as I told you, if you're starting with a very robust understanding of your basic laws, you're good to go. Other than that, of course, building your CV through internships. And the first internship, of course, try and do it in an NGO, because that will kind of broad base your understanding. thereafter, if you want to understand the careers and the opportunities, sports law or any law for that matter has a lot of opportunities present themselves. Now, if you're talking about sports law, there are sports-specific NGOs. For example, Go Sports is one NGO that is completely working in sports. You can try working out with them. Or else, every national sports federation has its own legal department. Not just them, every state association has its own YPs or legal people who handle the legal work side of things. So one can go into a national sports federation of their sports, of the sports that they fancy, and they can work there. That will keep them connected with their sports and with law as well. That's a very good place to work in. Other than that, of course, Ministry of Youth Affairs and Sports has its own law department. So one can try vacancies in that. One can build their careers there. Although the exposure there would possibly be a lot much better once you've done NGOs and things like that, and you've built your CV. Other than that, of course, Sports Authority of India is a wonderful place to work, and not just legal jobs, I would say. All of these places, if they have any research jobs, even they would help a lot because, of course, analytical minds of lawyers helps a lot in, basic, general, everyday issues in a particular organization. We also have a lot of private companies come up in sports. So we have Reliance, who has its own sports organization, own sports section. We have Adani Sports. So even the private sector is coming up to terms that sports is something that they should be investing in, and there are a lot of possibilities for lawyers, young lawyers, to join there. Other than that, in a direct situation, if an athlete player representative is something that one can build their CV for, even that is a very good role. So basically, you're looking into athletes. You're looking into one athlete dedicatedly, and you are understanding what issues they have, and you're resolving that for them, all the legal issues. So you can have a bunch of athletes under yourself, and you can, kind of provide legal services to all of them. You can be the player representative, or you can be the contract administrator, because they all have contracts among each other or otherwise with federations, etc. So that is one good place to try a career in. Of course, then there are law firms like Krida Legal. There are a lot of law firms which are very dedicated to sports and who have a great place to work with. Then again, there is Sports Law and Welfare Association of India, another organization which is working a lot in this particular section. So basically, they've tried to place lawyers and sports people, athletes, on the same platform. So that is also one place that if you want to grow your career in sports, you'll get a lot of exposure there. So these are all of the places that a person can go try. And of course, having internships in sports sector helps a lot in the long run. So if a person is very dedicated to the factor that they want to pursue sports law, they should try doing some internships there so that they understand as well.
So they can just have the basic idea what is a sports law, and then they can decide they want to pursue further or not.
Well, nobody goes back once they're into sports, I'll be very honest. But not just understand their interest, of course, but it also helps build connections. Because sporting fraternity is a very closed space. It's a closed limit. There's a limit on the people there, and especially on the law section, because sports law is still developing.
Yes.
So one would know the other. So if you can build some connections through your internships or through one job or the other, then possibly it will help progress your career in this particular section.
So, ma'am, this was my last question. And trust me, this is my best interview I really had, because you have explained wonderfully and in detail about everything. You have given so many inputs. That's how to go, what are the things you should do. So that's the end of our discussion. Thank you once again, ma'am, for sharing your invaluable knowledge and experience with us. It was just a wonderful conversation. I hope all the insights which you have given would be fruitful, beneficial for those who are planning to enter into this sector. Thank you so much.
I hope so too. It was a great session. Thank you so much, Surbhi.
Thank you so much, ma'am.